Hey there, and thanks for tuning in to Coffee with Klingman, where I talk with some of the most interesting people I know over a damn good cup of joe. Today in the cafe, I have e-commerce entrepreneur Justin Ray talking about capitalism, UBI, and the number one thing you need in order to start making money.
It's also weird because of my coffee, and now I'm feeling all
jittery.
Twitchy. Yes, super jittery. Super jittery.
Cool. Make those jitters even worse.
Exactly. So, but Justin, I don't want to sit that there. That'll be way too loud. Welcome. Thank you for letting me come to your office and have this recording. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, I want to ask you a question about making money. So you, back when you lived in Maine, so a couple years ago, you were making like 30 grand-ish, and now you're making significantly more, like 6 figures. But back when you were in Maine, you were still able to make your money make money. Am I right in saying that? Okay. What does the process look like? How is it different when you have less money, when you have more money?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is just finding ways to make money. So for me, I was always looking for scalable things that didn't require my time. I mean, ever since I was even a kid, I was doing lawn mowing businesses and mowing people's yards to make money, which worked well, but I had to put time and effort into that. So the big thing for me was eBay. That opened up so many doors. So it was more about just looking for crafty ways to make money. So it was selling things online, selling Yu-Gi-Oh cards, jeans, whatever I could get my hands on, just to make extra money. And then as I got older, that sort of turned into what I started doing was we got this weird inn at a mobile home park, and we would get a mobile home for either free or for a certain amount of money, and we would just go in there, and it would be a condemned mobile home essentially. And because it's in a park, you don't own the land, but you have the mobile home, which is technically a note. It's a lot like owning a vehicle. And we would go in and remodel the whole thing and then do what was called owner financing. So we would work nights and weekends, just busting our butt to remodel these things. And then we would come in on like a free mobile home, or for like $500, put about $2,000 into it, $2,000 to $3,000, and then what we could do is turn around and sell it as a mobile home note. So what it would be is owner financing. So we'd sell it for like $16,000, but we would do it over the course of 8 years, and we would what was known as owner financing it to somebody. So it's really confusing when you just talk about it out loud. But the point is when you start looking, you start to find ways to make money. So you start to find different opportunities. And a lot of people, they look at something and they just say like, no, that won't work, that's not good enough. But until you start looking for ways to make money, you're not going to find anything until you start trying those things and really honestly having no shame in what you're doing. Whether it's selling, I remember going into Goodwill and buying women's high heels that I knew would sell well on eBay and reselling them on eBay and making $10-20. And it was just that constant searching for ways to make money and then developing that, I guess, entrepreneurship or business expertise.
So what have been some of your favorite ways to make money? Favorite ways when you didn't have a lot, and then favorite ways now?
Favorite ways when I didn't have a lot was probably real estate. It would have been investing into like I was talking about with mobile homes, or getting a foreclosure as a home, finding maybe a family member who has money who is willing to invest with you so you can buy a foreclosure and remodeling it.
How much did something like that cost typically?
I mean, it depends on the area, but in Mechanic Falls in Maine, you could get a foreclosure for like $50-60,000.
Okay.
Which I didn't have money for, but I could get a family member to do that, then go in with a Home Depot credit card, put materials on it, remodel the house myself, and it took a lot because I had to learn all those things. Some things I knew, some things I didn't know, or maybe hire a subcontractor for certain things. And then, I mean, at the time I was working a job that made maybe $25,000 a year, so I wasn't making a lot of money, by any means, and it was just a matter of finding an opportunity and then being willing to work for it. So it was a lot of sweat equity, you know, a lot of really putting in the hours to make those things happen. And then also at the same time, the big one, my favorite ones were making money online because I saw the potential for it.
Scalability for it.
Yeah, I saw the scalability. And I knew that selling things on eBay wouldn't work long term because it just wasn't a scalable model. You have to find these one-off things to sell, you know? So it's really just connecting the dots because I worked in eBay, so I was selling stuff on e-commerce essentially. And then later on down the road, it was doing real estate here and there while still selling things on eBay occasionally. But eBay was huge for me because it got that muscle working of finding something. And
oh, that's fine. You can come on in. Or we got a visitor. You got stuff for us?
Just this one on top.
Oh, that's fantastic.
nice. Wait,
Just the one on top.
Oh, just the one.
Appreciate it.
I don't think
That's
Toy
funny.
Star would like that.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
It's funny. We're actually at a place called Spaces. It's a co-working space. So just got a delivery here. Sweet.
Nice.
Okay, so when it comes to, so you said doing eBay was a good first step because it got that muscle exercised, right?
Yeah.
What is that still like a good first step for people, or what would you recommend for people who are just starting to try and get into that?
It really depends because you got to work with how you're wired. Because I know some people who are successful business owners and they don't do well with e-commerce. They do much better with something else. So it's really just like learning how you're wired and gravitating towards that. For me, I like stuff, so it made sense to sell stuff. And then for some people, their minds work better with numbers, so maybe they start investing just a little bit into the stock market, not even really enough to make money. Because you got to understand, for a long time, it wasn't like I was really paying bills with this stuff. It was like making some months a couple $100 extra and some months not that much money at all. With real estate, it was like only adding $100 or so extra a month. So like with the owner financing the mobile homes. So it's always different, but what it did was it got me in that mindset of thinking about ways to make money, and eventually that evolves and evolves. But I would say one of the best ways that people could do this is network marketing.
Interesting. Okay, so explain. Why do you say that?
I say that because you're not going to find any other business where you have guys who are multimillionaires who are incentivized to help you succeed. So you're coming in fresh, you know nothing about business, and they're incentivized to help you succeed. And the biggest thing for success is proximity. Getting around other people that are successful. Getting around people who have that mindset, who are thinking and acting like that. And you're not going to find another business where you can enter that space for low cost, $500. Most times that's on the high end.
Yeah. And
you can be around those people and get instantly plugged into a network like that.
So it's less about being like actually, I don't want to word it like that. It's less about signing up and about showing up to the trainings and more about the mentor-mentee type of thing and getting in with the people who are above you and are willing to put in the work to help develop you?
No, it's actually about all of it.
Okay.
So, because you get the mentorship, but you actually have to care about the business model. You have to want to make it succeed. You have to care about the products. Because if you don't have that, then the mentor won't work with you. There's no point in you even signing up for the business.
Is network marketing scalable?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, what's one example? Like how would that work?
Well, with ACN, for example, I mean, very scalable. It's all it is just getting people into the business with you that want to build that business with you, and then selling the services. So I can't speak for all of them because I only did one, but ACN was all home services, so cell phone, electricity, cable TV, Wi-Fi, things like that. Those are services that everyone needs. Sounds like I'm doing a pitch right now.
That's funny. That's fun. From what I've heard, it's a great company.
Yeah. So, I thought you looked into it one time.
I did. From what I've heard, it's actually really great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so something like that.
Mhm.
Now, you're not always going to succeed in those, just like you're not always going to succeed with your business ventures. But the big thing about network marketing is it plugs you into a world where you can get personal development books, get the mentorship, and learn how to run a business. Because what those things do is they actually teach you how to run a real business. And they get you connected to other people that are positive and trying to succeed, or have already succeeded at a high level and are trying to succeed at an even higher level. There's no other way that you're going to do that besides network marketing if you find a good company to get plugged into. So I think that's great, because actually network marketing is when I really got my start in business, even though I didn't stay in it full time. But that's when I started thinking about business as a means to make an income for myself, as opposed to just these random side hustles that made a little bit of extra money.
More that mentality of this could work full time,
Yes.
as opposed to this is just something I do on the side.
Right, because even as hard as it was for me to actually see a lot of people doing this, there were other kids my age in that network marketing company that were making a lot of money, making six figures or more than that, and I was like, wow, this is reality. Now, it led to something else, but as a result of being around those people, I was able to get connected with other like-minded people. And then that's how I actually met my business partner. So if it wasn't for me joining that business, I wouldn't have gotten around other like-minded people like that, and I probably wouldn't be in business the same way I am today.
So, like, one of the best things is that first step, and I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah.
Is they see this end result and they're like, oh, I want to be running a full, like, 7-figure, fully automated business,
Right.
sipping tequila on beach. And it's like, to get to that point, you have to take the less glamorous steps, and your path is going to go left and right and up and down.
Exactly.
It's going to spiral and have a lot of stops to
Yeah.
get to that point, and a lot of people don't seem to recognize that.
Yeah, and you know pretty quickly whether you want to do something or not, whether you enjoy it or not. And there's a big difference between something being hard and working hard at it, and it sucks because you're doing the grind, and then just not enjoying the work of what you're doing. So I mean, that's probably a different conversation.
That's actually a really interesting conversation. What are some of the differences you've noticed in between those two?
So this is kind of funny, I'm going to say this, but network marketing was not for me. I did it for 4 months and I busted my butt, and I did actually a really good job at it. The reason I'm such a believer in network marketing is because the stuff that I learned from that business about mindset and about the business world has really contributed to the start of my business and the success of that, from the mentors that I had who were multimillionaires who were willing to invest time with me each week. But over time, I realized I actually didn't enjoy the business model of network marketing. I didn't enjoy having to constantly be working with people who were starting their own businesses and trying to get them motivated. And then some of them just would get unmotivated really easily, and I had to try to pump them back up to get them excited again so they could do it, because I was always excited. Not because I was always energetic, but because I believed in my future and I knew I was going to make it happen no matter what. However, not everyone has that mindset. So I really had a hard time with the ups and downs of other people's emotions.
Because your business directly relies on their motivation.
And so
That's rough.
I didn't enjoy the constant phone calls, all that stuff. I just wanted to be able to build a singular brand. So, but now I have a cousin who is still doing that same business, and he loves it. He has a passion for that kind of business.
Cody DeGraff, I had him on here at the first podcast.
Nice,
right?
okay. Yeah, and he does a great job at it, and he genuinely loves that business model. So that's for him. He figured out how he was wired.
That works really well for him. Super outgoing guy,
Yeah.
loves people, contacts people all the time. That doesn't surprise me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So for me, it just wasn't a good fit. It was very draining for me. In the same way, it was very draining for me to rehab houses. I hated it. I just
Really?
Yeah, I just didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy any aspect of construction and the physical labor. So, and like I did it for years and years. But, and I say that to say, just because you hate something doesn't mean or just because you're not passionate about something doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, because that's also can be character building.
I was gonna say, I think there's a distinction here in that between whether you hate something and whether you should or shouldn't do it, and whether
Right.
it's just not something you want to do. Like, those are three
Yeah.
very different paths.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe hate is a bit of a strong word, because it wasn't that I hated it so much as the rehabbing houses, so much as I didn't enjoy it and I didn't excel at it. And in network marketing, I just didn't enjoy it. It wasn't that I hated it, but over time it just wore on me. But I still busted my butt. And then I actually, through that business, like I said, I met my business partner and I found another opportunity. So it wasn't that I ever stopped just because I didn't enjoy something. I was always pushing ahead because I knew that one day I would push through that and find something that I did enjoy. Something, and then something that worked for me.
Yeah. So it seems this is something I've actually thought a lot about over the years. Is a lot of people talk about how success, if you want to be truly successful, you have to love what you do.
Yeah.
And like, so from someone, if you are successful, I totally understand that message. If you're not, and if you're just at like the base level, how I've always interpreted that message was, oh, then that means I should quit everything and just do what I love and like live
At
on
the
this
base level, yeah.
Exactly. And like, I think there's a disconnect in a lot of people, and there was for me for up until like about a year ago. There was a huge disconnect where that's what I genuinely thought people were saying. And over the last year, I've realized that's not what they mean. What they mean is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from what it seems like, what they mean is that if you genuinely love something, if you're truly passionate about something, you are gonna not only give it your all, you're gonna do it when it's not fun. Like, there will be no matter what you do, you can love something to pieces and there will be times where it's not fun.
Right.
You can love someone to pieces and there'll be times where it's not fun. Like, it's the same idea. And no matter what, if you genuinely love this passion, if this is your job, this is your life, then you'll push through the times when it's not fun.
Absolutely.
And by doing that, you'll become successful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I totally agree with that, and sometimes even passion is overrated. Like, I have investments right now that I'm not passionate about. Like real estate, I'm not passionate about it, but I'm passionate about the future that it builds and the money that it makes and all the other benefits of it. You know, so like passion can be overrated because there was other investments that I went into that I wasn't passionate about.
Exactly. That brings on the other tail end.
And what it's about is just deciding, what kind of lifestyle do I want to live? How can I get there? And how hard am I willing to work for it? And then you become the business, not the business that you're actually doing. So you're a business yourself instead of a businessman, if that makes sense.
Is that one of those mindset shifts, there we go, that you learned through the network marketing?
No. It was just, I think I was always doing it without realizing it, because I always knew I wanted to be free of a boss and I wanted to be able to create my own income. So to me, it was just finding that. I was never staking all my hopes and dreams on one business. It was always just, how do I get there? How do I find that? And then obviously I didn't start out with exactly what I wanted, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted. I just knew I wanted to make a living for myself. So that was like, if I can replace my income, that's great. That's what I want right now. And then from there it evolved.
Yeah, so you had that end goal and you're like, this is what I want. Yeah. Now, however I get there is how I'm going to get there.
Exactly.
And that was more important than the journey.
Exactly.
Interesting. But would you say that, how important is the journey then? How important is making that right choice? Is that more making that right choice sets you up for long-term success as opposed to shorter term, or?
Making that choice and setting me up for long-term as opposed to short-term success. I would say that it's when you're just starting out, you don't really want to be, unless you're this way naturally, you don't really want to be thinking 5 years down the road. You're kind of just like, I want to be in business, I want that freedom, I'm willing to work for it. So I think he needs to
Does he need to get back in? Yep. Oh, that's hilarious. Shame. That's funny. No, it's fine. It's my brother over there. He just need to get back in the working area.
So say that question again.
So how important is it for the journey. So for you, you said you had that far end, that goal, and it didn't necessarily matter. It did to a point matter how you got there, but that wasn't a factor until you were able to replace more of your income and then have the luxury to choose, okay, this is how I want to get to that goal. So how important is it in finding that journey? Like, where was a point where you were able to find that journey? I think is a better way to ask that.
Find the journey.
Where was a point where you're able to say, it's more important to focus on how I get to my goal as opposed to just getting the goal at whatever means I have in front of me?
I mean, I was always choosing things that I thought I might like. And then you try it and you realize whether you do or don't like it. That's just kind of how life goes. That's why college can be so pointless sometimes, because how do you know if you like it if you've never done it? So
it's a very expensive experiment.
I was always trying things like that. But the biggest thing was education. I was always reading books. So I was always trying to develop new ways of thinking, consume positive content that was getting me to think about the things I actually wanted. So I was always reading, always, well, listening to books. That was big for me. Always listening. So I don't know. I guess there was never really a shift. It was more so just continually searching for something. And I think no matter what it is, if you find something that starts making money that can change your life, you become passionate about it.
Yeah, you become super stoked.
Yeah. And now that might change down the road. You might get used to the money and then say, all right, I'm ready for something else. But most of the time...
That's going to be a good starting point, if nothing else.
Yeah, a good starting point. And then there's also the other thing of where you hear a lot of people talk about this. If you know what you're passionate about when it's something that you would do without even getting paid. And I think that's really true. Definitely true. But there's also not a clear-cut path to making those things most of the time your sole income-producing thing. Because not everyone has one singular thing that they're super, super passionate about. You know?
Do you have like one thing that drives you, or do you go more bounce on a bunch of different things?
I mean, I have a few things that are kind of in the same vein, but like, for example, I really liked riding motorcycles. Loved it. So I guess our first product for Rome was actually a smartphone mount for your motorcycle or bicycle, and out of that passion, that product was born, and then that's what originally made the business super successful. So but motorcycles weren't the biggest passion in my life. I was more passionate about music. I was more passionate about other things, but I still was chasing my passions, like in my personal life, and out of that was born something else. And now the business isn't just for motorcyclists or just for cyclists. So it's like you said, it's like a weird windy road with ups and downs that eventually connects you to something, but it's usually never what you imagine, you know, unless you're trying to be an athlete of some sort.
Yeah, that's fair. An athlete, if you're like a musician, if you have some sort of very clear thing, like this is what this is like the job title that it needs to be.
Yeah, where you're like, I want to be a musician who is singing on stage in front of X amount of people.
Exactly.
That is extremely specific. You know, and a lot of times, a lot of people become successful in the music industry, and it's not what they pictured they'd be doing.
There's a lot of, actually, this is really, I love this about the internet. It's been crazy. There are so many like 5- and 6-figure musicians that don't tour. And it's crazy because touring is such a huge part of like how you make money as a musician. At least that's what's generally taught, and you do make a good chunk of money when you tour. However, there's so many other options that if your idea is to play in front of 100,000 people 5 times a week, 6 months of the year, and that means you've succeeded, that you are missing out on so much potential success by doing what you love, because there are other ways to be successful in that genre or in that niche, I guess you could say. Yeah,
and again, it goes back to what kind of life do you want to live? Because for some people, they don't want to be behind the scenes making tracks for other people. They want to be on stage.
Yeah.
So you just got to decide that and then figure out how to get there.
Okay. So I want to take this and go a slightly different direction. I've been starting each conversation and each podcast with a question that I totally forgot to ask you in the beginning, so we're going to do that now.
Okay.
What are some of your failures when you first started to learn business, when you first started to take these steps and to kind of flesh out what this would look like for you? What were some of the failures and some of the roadblocks that you came up with?
Man, there's a lot. But there always is. I would say when I was first starting out would be buying a bunch of stuff from Goodwill for like $30-$40 when you're on a very slim budget, and then realizing you actually can't sell it all, or not being able to sell it all. That definitely is like a failure of its own, where it's really on the small scale, but it sucks because then you're out $50.
Yeah, and at that point you probably have a lot less income, so that hurts a lot more.
Yeah, it hurts a lot more. Yeah, at that point. Another one with network marketing, one of the reasons it was also so great is because the rejection piece was so huge. Calling people, having them reject you, having your friends not want to talk to you, taking a stand and saying, this is what I'm doing, and having your friends make fun of it for you and say things behind your back. It was really huge because it shows you who your real friends are, but it also, it's that aspect of rejection that you learn to deal with, which can be important for a lot of people to build that mental toughness of not caring so much about what other people think. Because the road to having a successful business is usually wrought with a lot of people not thinking you're going to make it and just not caring what they think. Yeah, so that was definitely a failure in a different way. But more real failures, even a recent one that just happened, is we had a supplier who was charging us 20 cents extra on our product that we were having them manufacture, and they've been doing this for a year now. It's 20 cents extra for new material, a special type of material that we had them use to improve quality. And we found out after we had a factory audit done that they actually weren't using that material. So that was like 50 or 60 grand that was just gone.
Yeah.
That we had been paying them. And when we confronted them about it, they didn't care. It was just, they were like, so what? Yeah. And they didn't make it right. So now we're switching manufacturing.
Yeah.
And that's shame on us because we should have had that factory audit in place a long time before we did. So, you know, we lost a bunch of money there, but overall the business is still succeeding. So that's good. But that was definitely a point of failure.
That's a really interesting one because, like you said, that's a more recent. So that mentality where you have that strong mentality, I think a lot of entrepreneurs do, in order to make it, I think you have to have it, is where you look at everything that you're doing and you're like, okay, this is what's doing great, fantastic, and this is what I'm failing at, this is where we're falling short, and not just stopping there but looking and saying, okay, if this is where I'm falling short, what could I have done to do better, and what will I do next time to do better?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and sometimes it's not even conscious. You're just failing and trying to succeed. Because sometimes it's not up to you. Sometimes something fails because it just wasn't a good idea. You know, like I launched a company early on when I had first started, after I had started Rome, to sell car phone holders. And eventually, it was a business with my dad, and eventually it failed. Part of it was I didn't give it enough attention. The other part of it was it was too competitive of a marketplace, and I wasn't having enough money to compete with the other products. And eventually it just failed. And I think we ended up losing collectively like 15 grand on that. So, you know, that's terrible. But it just is what it is. You just kind of pick up the pieces and move on.
So what are some of the ways that you've been able to move on? Because that's some pretty, like 15 grand, that's comparatively like not a huge amount, but that's still that's a good chunk of money.
Yeah.
So like it's not like you're losing like 600 grand or like something like that,
right.
but it's still
It's
like
still
1,500 grand or 15,000. It's still a lot.
Yeah, and it was even in some ways more pressure because most of it wasn't my money at the time. You know.
Yeah.
So like some people would say, so what? But that was actually
That's
more pressure.
The opposite, yeah.
Yeah.
So what are ways that you've learned to push through that when those failures come?
You just have to really decide where you want to be and where you want to go, and just know that the reward is going to be so much greater. Because I think if you can get through your head that money is honestly so it just comes and it goes. Money is so relevant. It's like you either are operating from an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset, where there's only this much money and once it's gone, that's it, that's all you get. Or you're saying there's always enough money for everyone. Everyone can have as much money as they want if they're willing to work for it, which is a very controversial thing to say.
So since you said that, we're going to finish your thought.
It's like saying money is like food. In a first world country, you can always find as much of it as you want. And sometimes you don't finish your meal and you might throw away some of it. That's that's a terrible example, but it's an abundance mindset of saying there's always what I need around me. There's never going to be a lacking for it. You know.
But then so what about the people who are making like under 10 grand a year, who are making like maybe even aren't making they're making like under 10 to 5 grand a year. Statistically, I believe it's about 12 to 15% of the population is making under. I think 12% is making like 12 to 15 grand a year, and 12% are making under 12 grand a year. They're
in America.
Yeah, in America. Specifically in America, they're called the rock bottom. That's like the classification, and then you have like the like lower working class. Then you have like the blue collar middle class, and you go up from there.
Yep.
But what about people who are making like that like rock bottom under 12 grand a year, barely enough to survive?
What do I say to them?
Yeah.
Wait, what's the question?
Yeah. So what you say you have this abundance mindset is crucial. Is that still crucial for someone who's making like barely enough to survive? Like how does that abundance mindset change their circumstances?
Well, I think it's everything. Because your obsessions become your possessions. So if you want to get somewhere that you've never been before, you have to think in a way that you've never thought. So you have to start obsessing about different things. And if you're always obsessed with how broke you are, you're never going to be thinking about how to change that. Because the more successful the business becomes, the more I grow as a person, as an individual, the more I realize that it's all about mindset. That's it. There's no reason that you can't do the same things that a multi-billionaire is doing. Because what's the one thing that everyone has in common?
I mean...
One thing.
One thing?
Yeah.
They're alive.
They're alive, and they have 24 hours in a day. And if somebody is getting a lot more done than you are in 24 hours a day, it's because they're thinking differently. They're doing different things with their time.
But what about the people who don't have the opportunities, the same opportunities?
I would say that that can also be a separate issue. But most of the time, I would be willing to bet they don't have those opportunities because they're not seeking them out. And that starts with thinking a different way. That's what I think. Now, and you might be talking about people in bad neighborhoods that don't have that opportunity. That can be true, but there's also so many success stories of, look at the guy on Shark Tank. What's his name?
Robert
Damian?
Robert Herjavec?
No, not Robert Robert Herjavec, too. Actually, most of the guys on Shark Tank. What?
Mark Cuban?
No, not Cuban. Well, Cuban,
Kevin
too,
O'Leary?
actually. No, the other guy, Damon.
Oh, Damian.
Damian John. All those guys started with nothing. And they talk about the neighborhoods they grew up in and how rough it was, but they were trying to figure out a way to make money. It started out simple, but they started saying, I want to change my life circumstance. So they started looking for ways to do that. Now, I do think that is a big thing that we need to be socially conscious of, is giving people opportunity. But most of the most successful people you will hear about, probably never meet because they're so successful, started from absolutely nothing. Well, you mean you're talking about people that are earning 5-10 grand a year. Some of these people were earning 0 a year. But it all starts with that shift. And that's why I think the biggest thing is mindset. The biggest thing is mindset shift.
But what about, so I love playing the devil's advocate, and it also helps I don't necessarily agree with you, so this is good. What about people who are working full-time at like, let's just say working full-time, McDonald's, they're
40 hours a week.
Exactly. So they're probably bringing in like right around that 12 grand point a year. What do you think?
Working full time?
Yeah.
They got to be bringing in more than 12 grand. Minimum wage is $10 an hour.
Isn't it still like? Isn't it like? No, it's not $7.50 that got raised. Isn't it like $9?
It's at least 10 now. I saw a sign somewhere. It's
Okay.
around 10 or 11.
Hey Meeks, any chance you can Google that? I'm sorry to interrupt your work. Yeah. Thanks. Okay, so he's gonna find this, and we'll actually do the calculation because this would be so.
Colorado's 1110.
Colorado's 1110.
Yeah.
Okay, 1110. That's 400 a week. Times 4, 1,200 a month. Times 12. That's 12,000.
15 grand. 15 grand a year.
Thank you.
15? Okay, 15.
Grand a year.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So if you're working full time, you don't take any
minimum
time
wage.
off. Full time, you get 15 grand a year. Do you still think that mindset is the greatest?
Absolutely.
Okay.
100%. Because you got to understand, I was that guy making 15 grand a year doing property maintenance for rental management company. And I was working 40 to 45 hours a week just at my job. But when I started to listen to books, my mindset started to shift and I started to find more opportunities. Because the reality is 40 hours a week is a lot, but it's not that much. You have all this other
Completely
time
agree with
that
you
you
on
can
this,
do
yeah.
stuff with. So when you're complaining about your life circumstances and you're saying, I'm only making 15 grand a year and I'm working 40 hours a week, I don't have time. And then you go home and you watch Netflix or you surf YouTube for 2 hours a day,
Yeah.
which I hear about people doing constantly.
All the time.
Or they surf,
huge.
or even if they're surfing Instagram for 30 minutes a day, you have time to figure something else out. You, especially with the overabundance of knowledge that's in the world through the internet, through YouTube tutorials and stuff. So if you're that person, you're in that place, because I was there, and you hate your life and you hate your job, you can do something about it in the hours that you're not working, because I guarantee you're filling those extra hours with something else.
So then you'd be very against like a universal base income or anything like that, by the sound of it. Yes? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm against universal base income.
Okay. And is it because like you see it as a bunch of opportunities around you, or?
Well, I think we're moving the conversation towards political now, because I think you're moving towards socialism when you do that. When you
okay.
create a culture of that everything is given to them, then you kind of stop. You're creating an entirely different political system. It's no longer. Now we're talking about moving from capitalism to socialism.
So what about the idea that not everything is given to them, but up to a point? So,
I don't know. I haven't explored that enough to really form a solid foundation on that. My first thought
respect
is
for
no.
not respect for saying that and not just trying to come up with something.
Yeah, and I wouldn't. My first thought, though, my first inclination is no. I think that's ridiculous, because I think what you're doing is now you're basically taking a. I guess I don't know. It's a topic that I would have to spend more time thinking about. But this is why I go back to education. That's the biggest thing, is mindset. So no matter what you're given in life, you could be given a fortune, but if your mindset is bad, you're going to spend it all. Most second generational wealth in families is spent, and it doesn't even see the third generation, because they're not taught the proper mindset to care for that wealth. So it doesn't matter if you start with a lot of money or a little money. It's all about your mindset, because that will dictate what you do with your time, because you can always get money back. I just talked to you about how I lost a bunch of money.
Yeah.
You can always get it back. That's why it doesn't bother me. It's not that it doesn't bother me. That's why I can handle the mental trauma of losing money, because I know it's not a significant impact in the long term, because I still have time, and it's what I do at that time.
Did you still have that mindset when you were like doing grabbing stuff from Goodwill and then realized you had $50 worth of stuff and realized you couldn't sell it? Or is that something you've developed over time?
I did, but it wasn't conscious. I just liked the idea of Goodwill, that I could have something sitting online and it could take me an hour to make $100 if I sell an iPod or something, as compared to an hour where I was working on a house where it took me, dozens of hours just to accomplish painting one room or one downstairs or something like that. It was the trade-off of time and money. But yeah, it wasn't as conscious then.
Okay. And so you talk a lot about education and how that's crucial. So do you think the education, we're going in a lot of fun directions here, but do you think the education system has failed in that? So how it used to be that when you got your education, opportunities, it aligned you and opened up opportunities, where now it's less of that, and they actually, Harvard Business Review rather, just released a paper on it that said, by the time you graduate with your bachelor's, the skills that you learned when you started are no longer applicable. It's literally
for some jobs,
for a lot of jobs, it's a 4-year turnover in skills, which is crazy.
Wow.
And so to look at that and say that education was supposed to offer these great opportunities and set yourself up, but in reality, it doesn't seem to be. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's absolutely true for at least 70% of people that go to college. I think there are certain jobs that, if like the typical doctor, lawyer, physician, sports medicine, things like that, the list goes on. But those are things that we'll pretty much always have a need for. And if you're going to get your education for that, you need it, because you need that degree. So that's important. You need those certifications.
Yeah, if you're like saving someone's life or have someone's life in your hands, it's important to know that you're qualified.
Right. But I think the real issue is where it starts in high school. Because kids aren't taught how to live in the real world. And they're subjects, like a class that should be a subject in high school should be credit, how to take care of your credit, because the credit system in America is so messed up. And then you get out of school and you get all these offers thrown at you to get credit cards, to go get a loan on a car, get a loan on a house, get a loan on this, get a loan on a Macy's credit card, whatever. Everything's thrown at you, a Starbucks credit card, all this random stuff, and you don't even know how to manage it. Why isn't that taught in school? You're not thinking about calculus 2 when all that stuff's happening. You're thinking about how to survive and how to make a living. And then another actually, somebody who talks a lot about this is Tom Billiu. He was one of the founders of Quest Nutrition. But I think that's a class that should be in high school. I think another class is mindset, and some might call it, I guess, mental health awareness, but learning how to actually manage your own emotions. But then also just that personal development aspect. I think that should be something that should be taught in high school. And yeah, I just think that high school really equips you to not know how to face the real world.
That's really unfortunate. That's a really bleak way to look at it.
Well, it's also true, though, because look at how many Americans are... Most Americans, I think the statistics are overwhelming. It's more than 60 to 70% of Americans have more credit card debt than they have savings. And then
I think the average person is about $12,000 in credit card debt, if I remember that statistic right.
Yeah. And then the average person doesn't even have a savings account whatsoever. So when you look at that, and then everyone's saying, oh, well, money's not important, but you have all these people that are crippled by debt, and they don't know how to actually balance their spending, it becomes a pretty serious quality of life contributor. It's either detracting or adding to. Is it
less of a money issue, but more of a knowledge issue?
I think it's more of a knowledge issue.
Okay.
And I think it has also to do with Oh, probably self-esteem and stuff like that. Because there's a reason people get consumer debt. You know, most of the time, the stuff that they're not. Well, actually, a lot of time you're going into debt for things you need. But some people are going into debt for a lot of things that they don't need.
I mean, a need can be such that's a variety. Like, need could be basic
Right.
food, water, shelter. And then some people would classify need as, oh, I need internet because I need to be able to apply for jobs, or I need transportation,
Yeah.
which is fair, depending on where you live and how you justify. But that doesn't necessarily justify spending $40,000 on a car.
And I think I mean more so like getting a car. You know, you need a car, so chances are you're gonna have to go into debt for that. But you can still at least manage something like that responsibly and do it smarter than not. You know, so I think financial management courses would be huge to have in high school.
So how did you learn some of this stuff?
I was raised on it. I was raised reading books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Fantastic
When I
book.
was 12 years old.
Excellent book.
So I was raised learning.
When you were 12 years old?
Yeah, I was.
Damn.
So I was raised learning about the economy. So I understand I got a leg up in that sense because I was raised with that knowledge. But even starting out in business, I was not given money to start out with. It was all on my own. And I think there's certain things you can go into debt for that are good, like good debt. But I guess we can get into that later. But what I'm saying is, for education, I was I am a product of that. In middle school, I was reading these business books on learning about the economy, learning that our money system is not real money. It's all it is the government attaching value to paper, essentially. So I learned all these things, and then I learned different ways of thinking about money, different ways of thinking about how to manage money, how to spend it, how to save, how not to save. A lot of these things that just sound basic, I was taught at a very young age. So I think America would look like a very different place if that stuff was taught at a young age.
Do you think there is a possibility? Do you think like that's something that we could get to, a point where that will be taught at a young age?
You know, I don't know. Because, and this is where we go back to sort of what we were talking about with politics. When you start cultivating a culture of people deserve things and they deserve a base pay and they deserve this, you take away their need to actually learn the necessities of life in some ways.
I absolutely agree with that, actually.
So when everything's owed to them,
Okay.
they expect it. So, and I guess this is a confusing question because I think we're moving more toward a handout culture. Everyone needs to be getting what they deserve, so to speak. So in that sense, once you start doing that, it takes away the gratitude in somebody saying, I just want to learn. I know you don't owe me anything. That's usually not the attitude that people approach life with when you meet other peers. It's usually complaining about how they didn't get something that they deserved. Does that make sense?
Sort of, but could you explain it a little more? I just want to make sure I have that cemented in my mind, what you're saying.
So, I know, we're in the middle of the day here. We need more coffee.
For real. Speaking of.
When you move towards a culture of handouts and entitlement and you're owed something from a young age, and that's taught from a young age, and then you're not really moving towards the culture of somebody learning these things for themselves that I'm talking about. Because a lot of what I'm talking about is self-starting, self-motivating, acquiring a different mindset that allows you to think in abundance instead of scarcity. Anytime that you're entitled to something, you're in a scarcity mindset because it's owed to you and somebody has to give it to you, and then somebody else holds the key to that, whatever it is that you want. But when you're in an abundance mindset, you operate from the mindset of, well, I can have anything I want. I have to go figure out a way to make that happen. Instead of waiting for somebody else to come along and give it to you. And I don't think the latter, or I'm sorry, the former, of going out and finding it for yourself is taught in our culture. I think the latter is taught, where you deserve a handout, or life's been hard for you, so you deserve this. And then it becomes entitlement.
So would no like equal playing, actually this is something that's always bothered me, is equal playing field. Just to tie it right along with that, is this idea that people deserve to be playing at an equal level, that all people should be playing at an equal level. And this might even be controversial, but it's funny, this is where I would take my stand, is I don't necessarily, I don't think that's possible.
I don't know what you mean.
So this idea that everyone should be given a handout so that they can all play and all like play life. Essentially, they can all start at an equal point. Now, for personally, I believe that the people who are making like less than 10 grand should be brought up to a point of making like 10 or 12 grand, something like that. That's just personal opinion. Other than that, after that, I don't necessarily think that there should be any sort of handout. I think if you want something more than basic survival, you should fight for it and you should strive after it.
Yeah.
However, I do see your point where if you're given that point up to like 10 or 12 grand, you're able to survive. It may not be comfortable, but you're able to survive. I see your point where they wouldn't necessarily have that, or where they might not have that motivation to push forward, to advance. Personally, I think people would. I think I don't think anyone is necessarily comfortable where they are. I think people get really used to where they are, no matter what level that is, whether they're making 5 grand, whether they're making 50 grand, whether they're making 650 grand.
Yeah.
I think people get comfortable where they are and they want to change things up. And so I think if you were to bring people out of a state of despair, out of the state of having like living on the street essentially, to up to a point where it's like, okay, you can function, like you have a roof over your head,
right,
and you have enough food to last week for week, and then if you want to advance that, you have to move forward. I think people's own internal motivation will kick in. Now, there would definitely be a lot of people who would just sit back and be like, okay, I'm just going to take this in. Like, no matter what system you have, people are going to take advantage of it. But personally, I think people, if they had their basic needs met up to like that basic point where it's nothing lavish, nothing expensive, no iPhones, nothing like that. It's like you have basic needs met. And then if you want to move forward, if you want to thrive more than survive, then that's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it will ever be possible for people to start on an equal playing field. Because once you go in with that mindset, then you say to the person who came from a wealthy family, even if they earned it themselves, that he got a leg up. But in reality, I know kids that come from wealthy families that don't do anything with their lives because they, for whatever reason,
if anything, that could actually be a leg down.
Yeah,
because you lack that motivation.
Exactly. You could so it's always going to be, you're always going to be coming from a different standpoint. But the thing, I think what you're saying is good in theory. The reason I disagree with it on a surface level without knowing and really studying it fully is that it's one more step towards socialism. And if you,
that's fair.
If you,
I'm not pro socialism.
Yeah,
that's
if you're
fair.
not for if you're not for socialism, and you hear stories of other people coming to America and saying you guys don't realize how good you have it, who come from socialist countries, then you realize that it's like a perfect world concept. It's like, it sounds good in theory, but there's a lot more that goes with that's attached to it. So it's a really complex conversation to have, I think.
It is.
Which
it is
honestly I don't
complex.
understand enough to really speak intelligently on it.
Yeah.
But that's why I disagree with base income.
So do you think, to kind of take this in the same conversation a slightly different direction, but do you think that if the more money you make, the more taxes you have to pay on it, do you think that is a demotivator for personal development, for capitalism, for striving after to better yourself, better your company, better the economy? Do you think that it's a demotivator for that?
That's a good question, because you also it's funny because it seems the more money you make, the more opportunity you have to save on taxes. Then the government in some ways makes it that way.
There's a lot of rules people don't know about. A lot of regulations that encourage that to happen.
I guess if you're a business owner, not always if you're just a high income earner.
True.
I do think that we should all have a responsibility to contribute back to the country that we're a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And so taxes in some regard are going to be inevitable in that sense to a certain amount. But then I do think it gets to a point where it de-incentivizes that. Because if you're just making more money and you're continuing to give it back, then what's the point?
So with that, do you think that I have the trail in my head, I just want to make sure I can logically get from point A to point Z. If that is to a point demotivating, then do you think so that means if that is in part demotivating, then being able to make more money and having a capitalist model would be motivating for growth and therefore for innovation. Would you follow that?
Yes.
Okay. So then do you think that capitalism is one of the few, or rather one of the best models for innovation?
I think responsible capitalism is.
Okay, can you explain that? What is that? What do you mean by that?
I think the old model for capitalism definitely left a lot of loopholes to be taken advantage of to make it so that you could sort of develop these monopolies that their power wasn't kept in check. In
like deregulated industries?
Yeah, or regulated industries.
Okay.
Where one person, like for example, in some countries, electricity is regulated, and then one guy makes all the money. But when you deregulate that, then you actually allow room for competition and healthy competition. And I guess I also mean responsible capitalism in the sense of you're taking into consideration everything that's going on. You know, you're not, if let's say you have a factory that's producing and it's not just pumping waste into a river, things like that, and being responsible with your resources. And not everything's going to be perfect, but that you're at least conscious of that. So that you're really conscious of the impact that you're having on other people. You're not just taking advantage of them. You're putting in place good morals and ethics for how you treat your customers and how you sell to them and how you interact with them and do business. Things like that. I guess a better way to describe it would be, I just recently read an article in Forbes, and it talked about how, I think it was, they did a survey, and I would have to look at the stats again, but it was an overwhelming amount of people. It was something like 90%. They asked them, what do you think of capitalism or capitalists? People had a very negative view of capitalists. It was actually it was a little over 50%, and then the other half didn't really know what they thought. So over 50% had a really negative view of capitalists. But when they asked them, how do you feel about entrepreneurs, or do you know somebody that's an entrepreneur that's starting a business or has a startup, over 90% of people had a positive view of entrepreneurs. And it's essentially just saying the same thing. Entrepreneurship can't exist in a socialist country, really.
So do you think like there's some sort of disconnect or some sort of, it sounds like there's a negative connotation with the word capitalism, where it's not necessarily the meaning that people are opposed to, but it's the word itself has gotten a lot of negative connotation.
Yeah, definitely, because it's associated with monopolies. It's associated with the super rich taking advantage of the poor. It just over the years it's gotten so muddled.
So you're more an advocate for responsible capitalism, as you call it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting.
And just being aware of the impact that you have on your society as a whole. Yeah, so does that make sense?
That does. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's just kind of funny because most of the time when you hear somebody talking, entrepreneurship is a very cool thing to do
very
right
trendy
now.
right
Very
now.
cool to be an entrepreneur. Most of the time it's code for I don't have a job and I'm just trying to figure out what I want to do with my life.
That's exactly what it's code for.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I had a conversation with my bro who's sitting right there. We had a podcast a couple days ago talking about this, how Gary love Gary Vee to death. I follow him. I am stoked that he is popularizing entrepreneurship because there's so many positive aspects and positive things about it. But that is, with every positive thing, there's pretty much every positive thing is going to be a negative side, a downside, and that is one of the downsides. Is as entrepreneurship has become more trendy, it is essentially become this thing where it's like everyone is an entrepreneur and everyone wants to be, and they don't necessarily look at, okay, what are the day-to-day? It's the loneliness, the depression, the anxiety, the failures, the rejections. It's all just about, okay, I'm sitting on my laptop, and as it's this joke that they made, and I think it's hilarious. It's I'm sitting on my laptop, and dude, this logo is going to be perfect. I mean, I have this business, it's going to be great, and as soon as I get this logo, 30 days won't be profitable. It's going to be great. And it's this idea that's not necessarily... That's just working on the things you enjoy, the positive things, not necessarily the down in the trenches entrepreneurship.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, really what entrepreneurship is the freedom to create your own source of income and the freedom to create in general, which is essentially capitalism. I mean, it is
tie it all right around there.
You really can't say that entrepreneurship is different from capitalism. There's just a different view of capitalism.
Yeah, capitalism, it is like pretty much crafted for the idea of entrepreneurship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So much so that even certain parts of China are sanctioned as capitalist parts.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
This is brand new to me.
I need to figure out a better way to explain it. It might be a different word, but essentially the government saw the actual need for it in certain parts of their country to where they allowed people to have their own businesses and to operate more so under a capitalist model. Doesn't mean China's a capitalist nation, but what actually happened in those areas, in a lot of the newer provinces around the Shenzhen area, was those business owners that started to make a lot of money actually started to pay for certain bridges and roadways to be repaired that the government wasn't putting money towards because they just needed it done. They needed to get to and from work, and they had the money because they were allowed to produce that money. So even China is adopting that in some small sense.
In a small sense, here and there.
Yeah, here and there.
Interesting. You said near the Shenzhen area? Is that how you pronounce it, or?
Yeah, Shenzhen. Yeah,
Shenzhen,
it's
okay.
Essentially in the Guangdong province.
Okay.
But this is the definition of capitalism.
Okay, fantastic.
An economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by state.
Okay. Yeah. I see your point in how it is directly connected to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Being an entrepreneur.
Because it's basically saying you own the results and you own the outcome instead of the state producing.
That ownership.
I mean, look at the U.S. Postal Service. $4 billion.
That's hysterical.
Every year.
That is true.
It's losing $4 billion every year.
That is very true. My dad worked for them for like a very short stint, and he literally was like, the term "going postal" is there for a reason.
Exactly.
It is so inefficient, and the systems and processes they have set up.
It doesn't allow for innovation.
It doesn't. Which then ties back that whole idea that the capitalist model really fosters, one of the best ways to foster innovation.
Exactly, because it allows healthy competition, because everyone gets a piece of the pie.
Then what do you think about this idea, and I know we've talked about it, but I just want to explicitly talk about it, is this idea that everyone gets a trophy. That idea, no matter what you do, everyone gets... Yeah, okay.
You went there.
I went there. Of course I went there.
Well, first of all, I think it's terrible.
Okay.
Because even from a young age, you have, like, your performance, your rewards are merit-based from grading all the way up through grade school. You're not going to get a good grade on your paper if you don't do the work. It's as simple as that.
Well, a lot of places are changing to like a pass or fail. Like did you show up, did you do work, did you submit a paper, was it good enough to be classified that you read the instructions? And if it was, okay, pass. If it's not, then fail.
Well, I think I think it's trying to accomplish meeting somebody's low self-esteem needs by not addressing the real issue.
Okay.
Because what you're saying what I hear you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, or not you specifically, but when we say everyone gets a trophy, it's almost like we're saying we want everyone to feel okay, to feel like they're good enough. But when we are taught the fundamental, when we're taught at a fundamental level that you are good enough as you are a good enough person. Your identity as a human being has no bearing on what you succeed in life. You are a human being, and that's why you deserve respect, dignity, and love. No matter what ethnicity you are, no matter what orientation you are, no matter what you believe, you're a human being. So you deserve respect, dignity, and love, and you deserve to be treated with such. That's your birthright as a human being. Okay? When that's taught fundamentally, it takes away the need to get a trophy in everything that you do. Because then what you do has no bearing on your identity as a person. So now you don't need to get a sticker in school just for participating. No, because now you go out and the value that you want to contribute to the world, you get rewarded in turn for the value that you create. But that has nothing to do whether you win or lose or succeed in business or succeed in the arts or whatever it is that you pursue, has no bearing on your identity as a person, as a human being. That doesn't mean if you fail, you get your dignity and respect taken away. That's always there. That's a fundamental base need and just way that you should be treated as a human being.
Do you think we will, or what do you think we could do with the education system and in the education system to teach that fundamental love, acceptance, or fundamental love, acceptance, and respect?
That's a good question. That I don't know how you would approach that. I do think there are a lot of good movements. One thing that's happening in our culture today is happening more often. So I don't know exactly how you'd go about tying that into school, but I'm sure you could come up with a way.
How have you learned it then? Let's just take it at a personal level.
Well, that goes back to how I was raised. Because I was raised that everything I just said, that's how I was raised. So that was fundamental for me. It doesn't matter if I meet somebody who you're going to have biases no matter what, even on a subconscious level, but it doesn't matter who I meet, what income level they are, what ethnicity they are, what orientation they are. I'm still going to treat them as a human being. And they deserve respect and dignity.
And that makes actually a really good distinction between whether that's something the education system should be teaching, or that's something that families should be teaching, and individuals should be teaching in the home.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. That's a good question. I think that the education system can at least have somewhat of an emphasis on that.
If not teaching, at least a reinforcement.
I guess as a culture, reinforcing that, not contradicting that. I don't know. I don't know exactly how that would play into that, though.
I'm not sure either, but that is actually a really good point. And I know for me personally, that has helped me a lot. That's helped me deal with failure. That's helped me deal with rejection.
Right.
Is having my identity not rooted in my results, but rooted outside of it, so that I'm free to face that rejection, free to face that failure.
Right.
And it doesn't impact who I am. It sucks. The feeling sucks, of course, but it doesn't impact who I am or my value.
Exactly. And that's why the idea of everyone gets a trophy is actually teaching people low self-esteem. Because what happens when out in somewhere in the world they don't get a trophy for something they did? Now their identities are tied to their performance.
It's true. That's actually a really good point.
And as soon as you start tying identity to performance, that's when you start to have more anxiety, more not self-love, the opposite of that. And because you're not just good as you are.
it's not good as you are, but you need that improvement.
Right.
Interesting. Well, is there anything else you would like to say? I think we can probably wrap this up. I know it's been a chunk of time.
I don't know.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
I don't really have any thoughts off the top of my head. Was there any other questions you had for me?
That was pretty much it. That was more than what I wanted to talk with you about.
Nice.
This was very informative. I really enjoyed this. Yeah, thank you so much for your
Cool.
time, for letting me use your office for this.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
guys, go subscribe to Gabe's YouTube channel. Follow him on Instagram. Follow him on Facebook, Twitter, social media. Gabe's awesome. You know, he's up and coming podcaster, and you're going to want to be in on the ground floor. So make sure you make that happen.
Cheers, guys.